It's 10 Count Blog!
Hello and welcome to the 10 Count Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Tiller. Wherever you are and however you're listening, thanks for making us a part of your day. We are fan and listener supported, and that means we bring this podcast to you for free every Saturday. So the best way to support us is to visit 10countblog.wordpress.com and tell all of your friends to do the same. You got Facebook or Twitter? Well, we're there too. Give us a like on facebook.com/10countblog or follow us on Twitter at 10countblog. We're also on Instagram at 10countblog. 10 Count is also on iTunes as well as SoundCloud. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast. You can find a link to do so on this article at 10countblog.wordpress.com, or you can just navigate over to our social media and podcasts page at 10countblog.wordpress.com. Help support 10 Count and keep us going. This week's guest is one of the top faces for Tri-State Wrestling, and he's fresh off a victory at Tag Team Warfare over the Axis. That's right, Staff Sargent Stanley Roberts is on the show this week, and let me tell you, it was a pleasure to sit down with him. What many may or may not know about the Sarge is that he served in the United States Marine Corps in real life. It's an honor that he agreed to be on the 10 Count podcast. We talked to Sarge about his recent victory, and most importantly, the fact that he got to share that with his son. We also talk a little bit about locker room dynamics and the level of respect that he's shown at TSW concerning his current storyline, among other fun topics. Before we move on, thanks to R.O.H for Snorkeling into Oblivion. That's the official theme song for the 10 Count podcast. Be sure to check them out on Facebook and download their latest album for free. You can click the link on this article on our website. So grab some real estate and enjoy this week's 10 Count podcast with Staff Sergeant Stanley Roberts. Sarge, it's great to have you on the podcast today.
How are you doing today?
I am doing very well, and wanted to talk to you a little bit about how you got into wrestling. Now, you're relatively new in the entire business. You told me that your first match was less than a year ago. Talk a little bit about how you got into wrestling. What were your first experiences?
My first experience, I was like 5 or 6 years old. My dad took me to a wrestling match, and all I remember from that whole night was watching Ric Flair and his match. He got busted open, blood was flying everywhere, and I'm sitting there as this little kid going, oh my God, he's hurt, he's injured, and just the love of it started right there.
So tell me a little bit about, from then, your love kind of grew, and obviously you got to a point where you got into wrestling enough to where you wanted to make it a hobby or a career choice. I don't know exactly where you want to go with this, but talk a little bit about from that time, from when you were little up until now, how it got to this point.
Well, after that, grow up watching it on TV. Sting was a major influence on me. I loved watching him work. Bret Hart, the Four Horsemen, all them guys all mingled in together in their stories and how they told it in the ring. Stuff like that keeps everybody interested. Then I hear about TSW over in Vincennes. I go over to a show, I believe it was October of 2014. I watched their show, watched what they're doing, and how everything's for charity, watched the workers, the wrestlers, and how they hold themselves, and they all do a great job. Then I talked with Barry Baker after the show, told him I was interested in helping out in any way I could. From that point on, I came into training and worked security for 8 months for their shows.
Okay, and it's kind of neat. You were kind of like me when it came to going to see it. Personally, the first time I ever went was in February, and it was actually the night that you won the United States Championship from Merrick Abdul, which we all know there's a spoiler in the last episode. But I thought it was just going to be kind of hokey. I thought it was going to be backyard wrestling. I didn't really know what to expect. Talk a little bit about how impressed you were with TSW, because I know I was.
I was impressed with the athletes and the wrestlers there and how they portrayed their story in that ring, how well they performed. You had Sam Knight there. You had Xander Kelly there, Zach Hogan, Will Bray. Those guys and Zane Arkham. And Bareback Jack was actually wrestling at that time as well. And I watched them guys work in that ring, and it was just, I was in awe because I was like you. I'm going there to watch this and go, is it going to be hokey? Are you going to, are you going to see stuff that you shouldn't see like you normally wouldn't see when you're watching WWE, Ring of Honor, stuff like that? And you don't want to see that, and you don't see it there.
So what stuck out to you that first night about it that made you actually want to go talk to Barry?
The main thing was I'm always a person that loves to give back, and watching them do the shows, I believe there was one for Gage Bessing, and donating that money to that family. And I sat there and I thought, well, if I personally can get out there in front of these kids and these families, and they have their issues, if I can get out there and make them forget about that issues for that 10, 15 minutes I'm out there and they can have a good night, then I'm going to do it.
That's an awesome attitude, and I love what TSW does. There's a lot of great work going on as far as the charities that they work for and all the donations and the money and the auctions. I mean, if you haven't been out to a TSW show, if you're listening, you really ought to. So talk to me a little bit about how you got to a point where you were training. I know that you said that you were working security and you were doing kind of odds and ends stuff for TSW. Talk a little bit about when you actually decided to start training to be a wrestler, and what was it like?
My first training session, I got there, I was a little bit later than when they start their training, and I walked in, I was still in blue jeans. Xander Kelly was running the training at that time, and he had these guys sweating, they were puking, they couldn't keep up at all. And I walked in and Barry goes, if you want to train, get in there now. I didn't change my clothes, I stayed in my jeans, and I got out there with those guys, and Xander Kelly ran me until I could not go anymore. I laid there on that floor in a pile of sweat, but I would not give up. I'm 34 years old. I was 33 at the time. I'm out there with kids 17, 18, some of them up to 22, whatever. And I'm not going to be outdone. I'm not going to quit. That's not in my body. That's not in my mind. I was a Marine, and that's the way it goes. I'm going to go until I can't go anymore, and then I'm going to dig deep, and I'm going to give it some more.
What was that old adage, pain is weakness leaving the body? Is that something you heard a lot in the Marines?
I heard that very often, and it is still true to this day. You ask any of my kids or anybody that's actually trained with me, they've heard that saying over and over again.
Yeah, it's something I heard. It's not Marines, but I did JROTC in high school, and our instructor was a Navy SEAL, and I heard that quite a bit myself. So talk to me a little bit, Sarge, about training and being your Marine Corps experience. I don't want to say that wrestling or Marine, I don't want to compare the two, but I'm sure there are challenges to either of them. How did your Marine training help you kind of be above the cut? Because you're one of the top faces in TSW. You're kind of above, you stick out above everybody else. You've got that certain something. Talk a little bit about how being in the service helped that.
Well, in the Marine Corps, they have this thing called close combat training, which is now actually Marine Corps martial arts. What they teach you in there and what I started learning in that ring was honestly almost word for word exactly what I learned in that ring. In the Marine Corps martial arts, you learn how to fall correctly so you don't hurt yourself. When you're training in wrestling, it's the same thing. You learn how to fall correctly. Does it mean it doesn't hurt? No, it's going to hurt. Your body is taking that fall. But you got to have the mindset that you're going to do it and you're going to do it right. Nobody, your whole life, you're taught not to fall down. And you're taught to try and grab yourself if you go to fall. You can't do that when you're in that ring. That's how people get broken arms, broken wrists, broken elbows, all kinds of different injuries. You can't second guess yourself, which in the Marine Corps they teach you constantly. I give you a command, you execute it without hesitation. You can't hesitate. If you hesitate, that split second, that's when somebody gets hurt. That's when something bad can happen. You've got to execute it, and you've got to be confident in yourself. Stuff like that correlates into the wrestling training almost verbatim. It's stuff that you've got to know, you've got to do.
So talk a little bit about how your character, obviously Sargent Stanley Roberts, it's a great character. It's something that people can identify with. It's something that people can get behind. And that's very evident with the pop you get. I mean, you come out of that curtain and people just go absolutely nuts. Talk a little bit about your character development based on your experience in the Marine Corps.
Going into it, working with Stephen Mitchell and Barry on the character side and stuff like that to decide which way we were going to go with my character, and we decided to go ahead and go with the Marine Corps drill instructor side of the character, which anywhere I've gone in my life after I joined the Marine Corps till now, I can walk into places, not have anything to do with military on, and I've walked into a hotel room just a year ago, walked in there to check in, and the guy looked at me and goes, "You were a Marine, weren't you?" It's that stature I have, I guess, the look, my mentality, how I hold myself. I don't know exactly how to phrase it. And that correlates directly into my character, Staff Sergeant Stanley Roberts, is because that's who I am, period. I'm not playing a game. I'm not trying to sell something that I'm not truly. And that shows to the crowd and to the people that, you know, this guy is actually who he says he is, which is hard to do now with the age in wrestling, kayfabe, stuff like that. I live the life that I portray in that ring.
And I think that's the most important thing when it comes to wrestling, is that there's got to be some realism there. There has to be something tangible that people can grab hold of and actually believe. And, you know, there's nothing more believable than a serviceman who has been, or who portrays a serviceman in the ring. And that's something we're getting a lot in WWE nowadays. I mean, if you look at Daniel Bryan, he was just this small kid from the Pacific Northwest who was a B-plus player, and then people just rallied behind him. And I think that ultimately is why, you know, people rally behind you. Talk a little bit about the experience of wrestling as Staff Sergeant Stanley Roberts, and tell me a little bit about what it is. Just kind of take me through your emotions when you come through that curtain.
Well, leading up to, before even walking through that curtain, you get butterflies, you get jitters. You're worried, okay, I don't want to let this crowd down. I don't want to let these fans down. You know, I want to give them the best show I can possibly give, because I'm out here to put on that show so everybody can forget about their worries at this time and live for that moment. And as soon as my music hits, you can start to hear the crowd and all those jitters go away. I have one focus. My mind is crystal clear. I walk through that curtain, and going from the first night, I walked through that curtain in Winslow, June 6th. I walked out through that curtain. Nobody really knew me too much. Just a few cheers or whatever. Still, at that point in time, my mind was focused. You know, get in there, do the best I can, show these people who you are, stuff like that. Till you go, let's say, around December time. You know, my character's now grown 6 months of being in that ring, learning how to work better, how to do my matches better, react with the crowd more. I remember till this day, I walked out of that curtain. I walked down one side of the ring. I went to turn down the other side of the ring, and there's these kids with cutouts of U, S, and A, and they're all standing there cheering, and I froze. It was just in awe. You know, I don't know how to put it into words, but the respect or the adoration that I was getting from the fans, and to this day, it's growing every time I come out that curtain.
And that's got to be a very humbling experience for you, because I know for me, when somebody comes up to me and says, "Oh, you did a great job on that podcast," or "I really enjoyed the last episode," for me, it's more of a, I can't believe people are actually listening. Is it kind of like that for you when you come out as Staff Sergeant Stanley Roberts?
Yes, it definitely is. Every time you step out there and you see that crowd growing, you see the fan base growing, and I mean, the jitters get more and more. I mean, I've grown so much in the short time but still at the same time, I feel like that little kid again. You walk through that curtain and you've got all these fans sitting there cheering you on. You got these little kids coming up, giving you hugs, high fives, salutes, all kinds of stuff like that. And I mean, it just warms you on the inside.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I wanted to talk about. You're really good with the crowd and the kids. I've noticed, just the 2 TSW shows I've been to, people seem to gravitate towards you. Even my brother-in-law, who is also part of 10 Count Blog, kind of more behind the scenes, we took some bumps in the ring, and I think you were the one that was actually teaching him, and he had so much respect for you. I think that's all I heard, the next couple of days is, oh, Sarge was so cool. Talk a little bit about that, and also, you've only been in it for a little while, but you're already getting in there, and you're already helping train some of these younger guys.
I wouldn't say I'm training per se. I'm helping them see it in a different light. You've got other people that have been in the business a lot longer than I have that do the training side of things, but I try and reword some of the things so they can understand it at a different level. Kind of like when I was in the Marine Corps, hey, you don't get it this way, okay, try it this way. It's just different avenues of looking at to get the same result. Some people, do better with this direction. Some people work better with this direction. It's goes more into a leadership mentality than an actual training mentality. A good leader knows how to train in different avenues in different ways so everybody can understand. And that's where, I was just trying to come in, okay, hey, try this, break it down in a different, it could be just different words, it could be in how the approach comes across. There's many different avenues you can look at when it comes to trying to get your point across to people that are trying to train and learn.
Absolutely, and I think we all learn differently in a lot of different ways. Do you have a lot of success when you're trying to explain something? Say, Steve is training somebody and say, okay, just do this, just do this, just do this, and they just can't quite get it, and then you explain, okay, well, you're doing the same thing, but do it this way. Do you see a lot of success for those types of people, and is that something that at some point you'd like to do more often?
I do see some success here and there, but I mean, with every success, you are going to hit a failure at some point, yes. But I don't actually consider it a failure either. If it's a learning experience, or you learn something from it, it becomes a learning experience, not a failure. You don't ever want anybody that's out there trying their hardest to fail. I will work with anybody. I will help anybody I can any day of the week to do whatever it is that their heart's desire is to do. And as far as something I'm wanting to do in the future, yes, definitely.
So you came into wrestling, you said at 33 years old. That's not the typical age that somebody's going to get into it. A lot of these guys get into it right out of high school. They're 18, 19 years old. I look at some of the bigger stars in TSW. I know Will Bray, he's 23. Patrick Taylor, I think he's 23. What's it like being the rookie, but also being a little bit older than everybody else?
It's a little weird to say it the easiest way, I guess. You're back there with these younger men, and they're talking about all their experience in the ring and stuff like that. And all of them, for the most part, do conversate with me, hey, why don't you try this next time? Or, they're giving me tons of information that I put in the back of my mind and I think about constantly. Well, I should have done this different, or I should have done that different. The guys back there in that locker room are phenomenal. They will help you out, and then some people, and you go to different locker rooms, they'll tell you this, and some people will be like, well, whatever, No, this locker room is building each other. That's why these crowds are getting bigger. That's why the fan base is getting bigger, is because everybody's working together. It's not, well, I don't have a title and I should have a title. No, it's not that. It's how do we as a team go out there and put the best show on that we can possibly put on for this crowd, so when they go home, and they go to work the next day or they go to school or whatever, and they're telling their friends and stuff like that, and it just grows the crowd more and more. I had a buddy of mine come to one of the shows a few months back. He brought his one daughter that's an avid UFC MMA fan. He told her he was taking her to a wrestling match, and her exact words was, "You know it's fake, Dad." She did not want nothing to do with it. He brought her to that TSW show. By the second match, she was cheering, ranting, raving, booing Barry. She was doing everything. By the end of the night, that girl will now not miss a show. When she started off the whole thing going, "You know it's fake."
And that's awesome. So many people have that mentality. Wrestling, and I know it's a sticking point for a lot of performers. Wrestling is not fake. It's scripted. It has a predetermined outcome. That's basically what it boils down to. Talk a little bit about your experience with that. How did training and getting to this point that you're at now differ from what you actually expected?
Training gets you ready for what you do in that ring, per se, as far as, the bumps, running the ropes, working with the other wrestler, and stuff like that. Nothing in training can get you prepared for standing in front of that crowd. It doesn't matter, honestly, to me. I've been out there when our crowd was a lot smaller. It doesn't matter if the crowd's smaller or huge. You get those, I'm on a stage in front of all these people, and you get that deer in the headlight looks if you're not focused. And that's one of the biggest hurdles, I think, for me to begin with, because I'm not a public speaker. I'm not used to being in front of people. I'm the guy in the background that makes everything work. That's who I've been most of my life. And then to step out in front of that crowd and go out there and have a great match and hear the fans cheering and everything like that, you can't really prepare for that as far as training wise.
What do you typically say to people when they say wrestling's fake?
If I fall on the ground, it's not fake. You cannot fake a fall. It is still a fall. Your body is still taking that impact. Do we go out there to legitimately hurt each other? No. We've all got other jobs. We've all got family. We've all got other things we have to do in life. It's not fake. It is scripted. The outcome is predetermined, and this is not in every match either. There are some matches where the outcome's not known. They will feed off the crowd. What's the crowd like tonight? What are they wanting to see? They will feed off that crowd instead of going, okay, well, you're going over. No, you're going over. It's not fake by any means.
And I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions people have. I'll never forget, and I've told this story on the podcast several times, but I always try to talk about it because it's a really good jumping off point. The first time I ever took a bump in that ring, it took my breath away. I didn't realize how much it would actually hurt. And, for somebody like me who has always loved wrestling and would never be disrespectful about it, it just took on a new meaning. It's like maybe I have been disrespectful without realizing it.
Yes, stuff like that. You take those bumps or falls or whatever you want to call it in the ring. I've had a match where the next morning I woke up and I could hardly move, let alone make it to the bathroom without, stretching real rigorously to even move my body. Every time you take a bump in that ring or you take a fall, I've taken them out there on the actual hard floor. It's not much of a difference, honestly, taking it on that hard floor as it is inside that ring. Yes, there is a little itty-bitty pad there, but it don't help.
Yeah, and that's evidenced by some of the injuries that you see within wrestling. Talk a little bit about yourself. I know that recently you took some chair shots, and those had you go. Had you? I won't say injured, but necessarily. I won't say they had you injured, but they had you feeling it a little bit.
Yes, the last show that I worked, I took a couple chair shots across the back from Abdul Merrick, and they weren't fake. I can guarantee you that. My body felt them. I felt them for up to 2 weeks later. We don't do fake. We make everybody a believer because we believe in what we do. If you don't believe in what you do, the fan sitting right there is not going to believe in what you do.
And I know that you told me earlier that you told them to go ahead and hit you with that chair. And it's about getting that reaction, I think. Does it help you when you actually get hit to react and to sell the move?
If you don't make contact with the other person to some extent, it is hard to, sell that hit or sell that move. To me personally, you're going to make some form of contact with me. I'm going to make some form of contact with you. Some people may call it working stiff or getting potatoed or whatever like that. I call that wrestling. When you go back into the territory days when them guys were going at it and everybody was real close to that ring, you didn't see a little tap. No, you saw them connect. It's not that the other person's trying to hurt the other person. You're making it as real as possible for that fan that's sitting right there by the ringside or somebody that's watching it on a video.
And let's be honest, there are places on your body where you can get hit, and it's not going to necessarily hurt you. I mean, it may sting a little bit, but it's not going to incapacitate you.
No, that is very correctly. Taking a body shot, a shot to the stomach, ribs area, stuff like that, that's going to be a lot different than somebody taking a shot straight to the head, the neck, stuff like or the back. I mean, it's how you work with each other and how well you know the other person makes the chemistry. And I think that's why TSW works so well is we all understand that chemistry to an extent and we all work and mesh well with each other.
Who would you say within the company that you have the best chemistry with, and who do you enjoy working with the most?
Honestly, I've worked, I believe it's 3, maybe 4 matches with him, and it's Zach Hogan. He is one heck of a worker. I haven't had the chance to work with Will Bray personally, but I know I've seen his matches. I've watched him tons and tons of time. He's another great one. My second match in TSW was against Terrence, the Southern champion. He was the United States champion at the time, but I had a match with him. He is a phenomenal worker. There isn't a wrestler in that company that I would not step in the ring with.
And that's huge because you have to trust the person you're working with. Something someone has told me along the way is that whoever you are working with, you have to make your opponent look good. How difficult is that?
Well, going on the face and heel side of things, I was so nervous my first time coming out because it's not easy to make people like you. Yeah, okay, I've got the military gimmick. But if I don't portray that, I am going to get eaten alive out there. They're going to chew me up and spit me out if I don't portray that military style, that military look, how I hold myself, and stuff like that. You've got to live it 100%, especially being a face. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do. Being a heel, they can go out there and they can, throw out their one-line zingers, whatever, about the crowd, get boos automatically. Still, it's not the easiest thing in the world to do to keep people not liking you and, hating you.
Speaking of, heel versus face, you are obviously, one of the biggest faces in TSW. You get the giant pop whenever you come through the curtain. The kids love you. You got people chanting USA. I'm sure you sell a lot of merch because I see a lot of kids with the USA, the American flag armbands. Talk a little bit about that line. There's a line that you cannot cross as a good guy and get away with it because automatically people start thinking you're heel when you do. How difficult is it to keep from crossing that line?
Honestly, right now for me, in the storyline that I'm in with Abdul Merrick, I could do just about anything and that crowd is going to cheer for me. They're not going to look at me as a heel. And the state that I've reached, like the height that you're saying now, one of the biggest faces in the company, for me to do something, it would have to be so drastically bad that my own morals would not allow me to do it.
And that's crazy because you don't really get a whole lot of faces like that. You don't get a lot of people like that. John Cena comes to mind, and he's kind of a once-in-a-lifetime talent for WWE. He's so polarizing that he plays the face, and people love him or they hate him. Do you ever hear any of that for you, or is it just all cheers?
I've heard one or two boos, but I mean it's been very seldom. John Cena is one of the biggest faces that WWE has ever seen, but yet he still comes out to a sea of John Cena sucks. But like he says when he was cutting that one promo, it doesn't matter if you're there to boo him or you're there to cheer him. You're there to see him. And, I mean, that's the same mentality I've got, per se, but I'm still relatively new. Everybody's getting to know me. I've worked a few other companies out there, and my fan base grows constantly. I've went to a show in Owensville. Don't know too many people over that way. I walk through the curtain, see a cheers, have my merchandise table set up, come out during intermission, kids coming up for autographs left and right. People coming up, great match, good job. That stuff right there keeps you going inside. All right, great. What am I going to do next time I step out that curtain? What am I going to do my next match? How am I going to step up my performance to keep them coming in to support TSW and sit in that seat every single time?
So speaking of that, I know you've had a couple offers to go wrestle for other companies, and I think the good wrestlers in the area do get those offers from time to time. What's it like when you go to Owensville or when you go somewhere else? Is there a lot of overlap between the fans, or are the fans that you see in Vincennes completely different than the fans you see, say in Owensville?
There is some overlap. You've got people that follow the indie scene around here very avidly, and there is quite a bit of overlap where you go and stuff like that, the fans. But I've gone where I've known maybe 8 people out in the fans or out in the crowd, and still my performance and how I hold myself when I come out there wins those other ones over that are sitting there that have never seen me before.
So what's it like going to these other promotions and working? Is there, I mean, I don't want you to necessarily compare TSW to something else, but on the same token, there's got to be big differences, especially with TSW being so community-minded. And then other promotions, a lot of guys are there to get paid because they're trying to get noticed.
Oh, it was an honor. I got chose to go and wrestle in the Coliseum for New Focus and EWA Wrestling. The locker room there, it was great. You had, what was it? Boogie Woogie, Gary Valiant was there, or Jimmy Valiant, or no, Gary Valiant, there we go. And you had a bunch of other great workers there. You had Tracy Smothers there, Johnny Richards, all them guys, and they try and give you their insights on the business. I had some of them watch my match and say, hey, great job. Next time, try and up this a little bit. Just little bits of advice. Most of these guys around this area that I've dealt with are all great. They're all willing to give you feedback. They're all willing to help you grow because, in turn, that helps them grow. It's all a tit-for-tat business if you look at it. If you do good, your opponent's going to do good. It's your job to get your opponent over. It's your opponent's job to get you over with the crowd. You've got to work that whole magic, or you're going to have the crowd sitting there like you hear in the WWE. This is boring, stuff like that. You don't want to hear that. That is morally degrading to that person in that ring at that time.
And I absolutely believe that. I couldn't imagine. I wouldn't want somebody to chant, this is boring during my podcast either. So I hope this is better than better than boring, let's put it that way. So what is the most memorable piece of advice you've gotten? I know you've worked with a lot of different guys in the area. Any of it stick out to you?
The main thing, and I've heard this from Sam Knight and Xander Kelly, when you're in that ring, you've got so much adrenaline pumping, so much things going through your head. You've got to stop and slow down. You've got to sit there and slow down and gather yourself, but at the same time, you've got to keep the pace of the match going. If you go out there and you do, real quick, you could end a match in under 5 minutes. And what have you done? You have told no story. You have not got the fans invested in your match whatsoever. Slow down. Make everything count that you do in that ring. Work with each other. You got to have that. It's like a roller coaster. You go up that roller coaster up to the peak. You come down and you go back up. You got to keep that roller coaster going all the way to that finish when all of a sudden you just drop the ending on them. Boom. And then you get that whole either a sea of boos because the heel won that match, or you get a sea of cheers because the face went over in that match.
So speaking of, ebb and flow of the match, and what's it like when that's off? How hard is it to bring a match back from, the brink of disaster?
Well, working with a few people, especially when they're in mask and stuff like that, it could change the whole how the match is flowing. They could get really overheated. You got some people that might get a little claustrophobic, stuff like that. And that's where ring awareness and interacting with the crowd comes into play there, or interacting with the guy's manager outside the ring at that time. You've got, if your opponent gets injured or has to stop to catch his breath for a minute, you've got to go and keep the fans' interest in the match somehow. And you've got to, it's a lot of thinking on your feet.
It sounds like it. And so I want to kind of circle back to one of the other topics that we talked about, mostly because I just thought of a question I wanted to ask you. We talked a little bit earlier about, you taking those chair shots and how they actually, you told them to hit you. What are some of the more memorable shots that you've taken? Have you ever taken a blow for storyline purposes, or is there something that kind of sticks out that was basically one of the more memorable shots that you've taken as far as your wrestling?
I don't know about my memorable shots per se, but I've had two moves that were done to me that will stick to me all the way through all my wrestling. I can guarantee you that. And one of them was a match with Zach Hogan. We were on the outside of the ring, out there on the floor, and he nailed me with his finisher out there on the floor. And I honestly did not know if I was going to be able to finish the match. That's how much pain I was in. And another one, I was in the Coliseum. I was up against Micus. Phenomenal worker. And I ended up taking the Three Amigos from him. He held me up in the air on the third one, rotated around the ring, and dropped me down. It was phenomenal, the crowd that night at the Coliseum. It was phenomenal that I got to be in the ring with that guy.
So I guess I should have asked this question to begin with, but better late than never, right? What's your favorite part about being a wrestler and being a performer?
That's a good one.
And there are a lot of good questions like that, but I imagine that there's got to be some kind of internal gratification for this. For me personally, it's something I want to check off my bucket list at some point. So I hope that everybody in the locker room and everybody who is already a performer, they have that personal self-gratification part of it, mostly because it's got to be something they enjoy.
I definitely do enjoy it, and yes, there is some self-gratifications out of it. I get most of my gratifications from the smile on those children's faces out there. All these kids that come out to the show, I've kind of made it into their living hero, or whatever you want to call it. Am I a superhero? No. I'm your average person, per se. I do this not for a living. It's, I'm too late in my life for it to be a career. My body's not going to hold up to it. I can guarantee you that. It's not something that I can make a career out of. It's something I love doing because of my passion for wrestling that I've had since, like I said, when I watched Ric Flair. That passion that he showed that night ignited a flame in me, and it's the passion that I carry on and to help those families out.
So let's shift gears a little bit. Talk a little bit about your current storyline with Abdul Merrick. I know that there have been a lot of interesting ideas floated around about this, but I know that the workers, I know that we had the spoiler about Abdul Merrick. I won't say it again just in case somebody didn't want to hear it, but the guys in the locker room, they ask you for permission when it comes to this storyline. They talk to you. They want to respect you since you are a Marine, and I think that's really neat. Talk a little bit about that and how that makes you feel.
There is definitely a lot of respect in that locker room when it comes to this storyline, because there is a lot that could go wrong in this storyline that could turn off a lot of fans. They're more worried of offending me than it is of the turn off of the fans, because what they do, they're going to get what they call heat. Whatever they do, they're going to get that heat, and you've got to build that to an extent. At the same time, they talk to me about, hey, what do you think about this idea? And I say, hey, let's go for it, full out. I'm fine. They might come up to me with an idea, and I'll be like, let's tone that down just a little bit, or why don't we try this instead? And I mean, they're open to it all. It's not, it's going to be this way, or you're not going to be in this storyline. It's a mutual relationship.
And I think that speaks volumes about the leadership at TSW to understand, hey, this guy served our country. He loves our flag. He loves his country. We want to make sure that we respect him and the sacrifices that he made. And by the way, thank you for your service. I don't know if that ever gets old, but in my mind, it's something that deserves to be said. Talk a little bit about the current storyline and how much fun it has been to work with Abdul Merrick.
Well, as far as that goes, it's been a blast working with him. There's been ups, there's been downs. I'm working a show one night, and after my match out there at intermission, talking with some of the fans, there was a guy that just recently got out of the Marine Corps. Come up, shook my hand, thank you for your service, stuff like that. That never gets old for anybody that's ever served. It's a sign of respect, stuff like that. And he goes, y'all worked in that match so well that he wanted to get up out of his seat and come in that ring. That's what we're looking to do. No, we don't want nobody rushing the ring, stuff like that. But that feeling, that's what you're grasping for out there in that ring. That tells me we're telling that story correctly. You've got to have the downs, you've got to have the ups. You can't have just the face win all the time. You can't have the heel cheat and win every time either. You've got to have a good equal there. If the face wins all the time, then that heel's nothing. Why? And then if that storyline ends and that heel goes to face another face and he just destroys that face, then you're killing two characters at once. You've got to work it all together.
So you talk a little bit about how these guys, they buy into that storyline so much, but for you there's a little bit more personal, a personal touch to this, rather, because back in March they brought your son into the storyline, and he is actually your son. For those who don't know, that is actually Sargent Stanley Roberts' son. And then back at Tag Team Warfare, you had a match with him. Talk a little bit about what that was like for you as a dad to have your son come in and start working with you.
It's definitely an honor to have him out there standing by my side. It was a little shady, them pulling him into our own fight. But as a father and as a wrestler, to have him standing by my side, getting out there with me, it was amazing. Just the night that he got attacked, as soon as I mentioned his name out there on that mic and called the Merricks out for a tag match at Tag Team Warfare, there was fans running up to him to get autographs. Just automatically, just by me mentioning he's going to tag team with me and he's my son, and it was automatically kids running up to him to get autographs.
So I imagine that's got to be a pretty surreal feeling. What was it like for him, to have people come up because you had mentioned his name and just, by association?
He was just in awe. He was awestruck, kind of like you meet your, idol or something like that. He was just the deer in the headlights. And afterwards, on the way home, he was just grinning from ear to ear. He loved every minute of it. He's got a passion for this business like I've got a passion for this business, and he's enjoying every minute that he gets to be out there with these guys in the locker room and training and learning. And he is like a sponge. He's learning everything he can. He's watches everybody's every move, and he'll ask me questions later, or he'll, hey, can I try this? Hey, can we do that? Stuff like that.
All right. Well, Sarge, we are running out of time, and I just wanted to really quickly, how can people support you?
You can look me up on Facebook, Stanley Roberts on Facebook. Like I said, at the TSW shows or any shows I go to work, I will post on the Facebook. I've also got merchandise out there. Hit me up on Facebook, come watch our shows, and help support TSW and the causes that we're out there to help.
All right, Sarge, it's been a pleasure having you on, sir.
Thank you. It was an honor to be here.
Special thanks again to Sarge for being on the show today. Before we go, let's get to some upcoming events. May 14th, Tri-State Wrestling has their first summer offsite at Finders Keepers Outlet Mall in Princeton, Indiana. This is a free outdoor show, so bring the whole family out and bring a couple lawn chairs as well. Doors open at 6, bell time is at 7, that's Central Time. Be on the lookout for the card reveal at 10countblog.wordpress.com. Also on May 14th, Elite Wrestling Alliance in Evansville is hosting a show at the Mack Center at 6080 Indian Mountains Road in Mount Vernon, Indiana. Advertised for that show is Xander Kelly, Matt Diamond, Johnny Richards, AJ Riley, and many more. Tickets are $10. Doors open at 6:30. Bell time is at 7. That's on Central Time. May 28th, Tri-State Wrestling presents Proving Grounds at the Vincent's Eagles Club on Willow Street. Doors open at 6. Bell time is at 7 Eastern Time. Zach Hogan takes on Will Bray in a match to decide what their stipulation will be at June's Night of the Champions event. Tickets are $5 at the door. Kids 4 and under are free. This month, all proceeds go to the family of Phyllis Miracle Hall, a relative of TSW Hall of Famer Eric Marks. Phyllis lost her battle with cancer recently. Coliseum Championship Wrestling in Evansville presents Redemption May 28th at the historic Evansville Coliseum at 300 Court Street. Tickets are $10 at the door, $5 with military ID, either active or retired. Kids 5 and under are free. It all goes down at 6:30 p.m. Central Time. Wednesday, June 1st, New Focus Wrestling will be at the Evansville Coliseum. Match card features names such as Tracy Smothers, Xander Kelly, Will Bray, Zach Hogan, Cliff Compton, and many more. It all goes down at 6:30 Central Time, Wednesday, June the 1st at the historic Evansville Coliseum, 300 Court Street. Tickets are $10, active military, and kids 5 and under are free. Don't forget to support all of these local promotions by liking them on Facebook and following them on Twitter. Search for them by name. I promise you'll find them. If you don't want to do that, you can also check out our area indie promotions page at 10countblog.wordpress.com. Also, be sure to check out our page on 10countblog.wordpress.com entitled Social Media and Podcasts. You'll find links to all of our social media pages, iTunes and SoundCloud, and that's all at 10countblog.wordpress.com. If you don't want to go there, we're at facebook.com/10countblog or on Twitter at 10countblog. Give us a like or a follow and help us get to 5,000 combined likes. Thanks again to Rollick. They've got their Rollick Frolic event coming up June 25th at the Vincennes Riverfront Pavilion. Lots of great bands on the bill for that show. Go out and support them, and remember to download their latest album by clicking on the links on this article at 10countblog.wordpress.com. Finally, don't forget to subscribe on iTunes and SoundCloud by searching for us on both of those platforms, or just click the links at 10countblog.wordpress.com. Be sure to stay glued to our social media pages as well. We'll be announcing who our next guest is at some point this week. Until next time, thanks for listening to the 10 Count Podcast.
The bodies hit the floor, let the bodies hit the floor.
Evansville, Indiana, on Saturday, May 28th. Get ready for an exciting night of professional wrestling as CCW proudly presents Redemption. Eddie Young and the real deal Derek Neal collide in a grudge match that's guaranteed to bring the house down. After ruthless attacks, LT Falk and Fireball Roberts team up to take on Stan Sierra and the Double R superstar, Randy Royal. Also in action, legendary Larry D, Picture Perfect Jordan Cage, Mark Houston, and many more. Witness all the hard-hitting action on May 28th at the legendary Evansville Memorial Coliseum. Tickets on sale now at the Coliseum box office. General admission is only $10 or $5 with a valid military ID. VIP tables also available. Doors open at 6:30 p.m. and bell time is at 7:30 p.m. Check out the CCW Facebook page for more info. CCW Redemption on May 28th. A legacy will be born. Be there.